The attendance is on, in case you don't know. Okay, so I think we can start. Let me share. So, by the way, as per a sheet that was, as per a form that was circulated yesterday, we will have the two lab exams on 3rd and 10th July. Okay, and both these exams are compulsory. There are no options this time. So please, I'm saying this so that you can prepare accordingly. I understand that some of you have to arrange for giving the exams because of the internet issues. So please, I think there's enough time right now. So please arrange for 3rd and 10th July. These are Saturdays. We'll have the lab exams, two lab exams. Okay.
Excuse
Check.
me, sir.
Yeah, go ahead.
So what will be the platform?
This is not it is not going to be a programming heavy exam. Okay, so basically you can just write code anywhere that you want. I We will have a look at the C++ code, but more than the code, I would like to see how the code has been structured. Okay, it's so basically the output is not something that matters more, rather than how you have structured your code. Okay, so that is why it doesn't matter. We are not really, platforms are necessary when you are uh, test case oriented, when we just want to talk about the output. Here we are going to see how do you design the solution. Okay.
Sir, and about the 2 days for the exam, will both the days have the same topic or will they have?
No, there'll be two exams. I mean, third will be a different exam, 10th will be a different exam.
Like,
So
is there any different in the pattern or something?
pardon?
Is there difference in any patterns or what? Because
Patterns, no, I'll give you, it's similar to the practice labs. The practice lab questions that I've been giving you, it is going to be similar to that. It's just that when practice labs we do not evaluate what you have done. It's These are optionals, right? Optional. And I don't see too many people even being interested in doing practice labs. So maybe I'll just give one more practice lab this week, and then I won't give any in the next. And I'll give you the solutions to the three practice labs as well. Maybe I'll give a practice lab next week. This week I'll just give you solutions for the first two, so that you can read and understand, and then try to do it yourself. And then 1 week before the exam. Uh, so how many weeks do we really have? Today is 16th, 23, 30. Yeah. So I think there will be one. We can afford to give. I can afford to give you one more practice problem, at least one more. Uh, but yeah, the idea is the exam will be based on the pattern of the practice problems, and we will have a look at um, how you are building the solution. That is the idea.
so my question was, will both days there be practice problems?
No. So on 3rd and 10th July, you will get two problems which will look similar to the practice problems that I have been giving you
Oh,
for
okay,
the
okay,
past two
okay,
weeks, right? But this time they'll be evaluated for
okay, okay.
for
Now I
3rd
understand
and
that,
10th.
sir.
Okay.
Thank you,
So
sir.
you will have to submit the solution within some amount of time, within, let us say, 3 hours of time,
Yes, sir.
and then the TAs will evaluate your solutions. They'll ask you questions. They would like to know how they'll like to know your thinking process. There will be a viva. So that is, it's similar to how a typical lab exam works. It's just that instead of the actual output, it will not be output intensive. output will probably only carry maybe 15-20% of marks. So if the output is as expectations, you'll get some 15-20 marks, but the actual amount of marks will be on how you designed the solution. That is the idea.
Okay,
Okay,
sir.
any other questions? Okay, so let's start. So this week 7, week 8, week 9, and week 10. These 4 weeks we are going to talk about four different types of UML diagrams, and along with that we will learn some four different types of system building skills. Um, so these system building skills, at least of this week, it's going to be multi-threading. um, then there are some other system building skills that we will talk about in the next 3 weeks, but in each week I'll also give you a very brief overview of one type of UML diagrams. Okay, so this week we'll start by the most commonly used UML diagrams. They are the class diagrams. So we discussed something about the domain model. I'm not sure how many of you remember it, but we discussed it in the beginning when we talked about object-oriented methodology. So just to give you a reminder, a domain model is basically a model which discusses the entities, the concepts, the relationships about a typical domain, right? So if we assume that the domain is the banking domain, so in banking domain, typical concepts will be that there is a customer, right? And there is the customer has an account, and the account could be a single. It could be held by a single customer, or it could be a joint account. Things like these, right? So these are some things which are associated with banking. So someone who's been working in banking for a long time, that person can give you all this information. And a domain model is just a more what can I say, a more systematic representation of this information. So that is what we call as a domain model. So what in this whole concept of object oriented methodology, object oriented design, what we do is is probably the first step is to either find out or build a domain model, and then from there onwards what we do is the first kind of model, the first kind of designing that we start doing up is the class designing or the class model. And class models are often easily derivable directly from the domain model itself. Why? Because class models are all about capturing the essential entities and essential relationships between entities from your domain, the domain to which your project belongs to, right? So let us say Infosys. You all probably have heard about Infosys. So Infosys is an Indian IT company. So Infosys has a product called Finacle, and Finacle is a product that has been specifically developed for banking sector. So it has so many attributes which is and it's actually a very popular product as well. So when Infosys would have decided to build Finacle, the first thing that they would have required would have been people from the banking domain, not the software developers. They would have required people who had all the knowledge from the banking domain. So I'm just guessing, but I'm pretty sure this will be a very valid guess, that the first thing that they would have done when they would have planned Finacle would have been to hire people uh, who have had, you know, great amount of experience in banking. So if you had, let us say, 15 years, 20 years, 30 years of experience in some domain, most of the IT companies, if they have a project on that domain, will be ready to pay any amount of money to you and hire you. Why? Because they want someone who can build the domain models for them. Okay, this is why these Indian IT companies often hire people from very distinct backgrounds. They hire engineers from mechanical engineering background, civil engineering background, I think they even hire people from bioinformatics background. Why do they do that? Because basically some way they want to have a pool of engineers um, who have at least some amount of knowledge of different domains as well. Again, I mean, they are not domain experts by any mean. They will hire probably a domain expert anyhow, but sometimes it's a notion that it might help you if your workforce, if your IT workforce has knowledge of other domains as well, right? So coming back to the point, so the first thing that you do is you try to build a domain model, and from that domain model, based on the project that you have taken up, whatever is required, you basically start picking out those entities and those relationships from that model, and these entities and relationships become the classes in your design, right? So this class model represents how your system will look like. Okay, basically the entities in the system as well as the relationships between them, these are captured in the class model. And classes, you already know, have properties. Are basically the fields of the class, and they have behavior, and behavior are implemented using methods. So, and then this is also something that I have told you, that the good object oriented practice is to keep the fields private and the methods public, unless you have a very strong reason to go against it. So this we have already discussed, that the domain model provides enough information to create the class model. By the way, the class model will only include classes which are necessary for your project. Okay, so this is the difference between a domain model and, let's say, a class model. In the class model, you only care about the entities which are going to be a part of your project. If there is an entity which is a part of the domain model, but in your project, there is really just no need to know about it. It is not included in the class model. In the class model, you only include entities which are going to be a part of your project. So, what is the most common way to represent class model? I have told you already that whatever design decisions you make within your project, they have to be communicated to the rest of the stakeholders in the system, and you can either do it as we saw in previous week, by writing text or by creating diagrams. When you create diagrams, these diagrams need to have some kind of standardization so that it's easier for people to interpret them. So this is where class diagrams come in. So one way to represent your class model is via class diagrams. So how do you create a class in a class diagram? So classes are shown by rectangular boxes. These rectangular boxes usually have three compartments, and they are basically horizontal compartments, dividing the box horizontally. The topmost compartment holds the name of the class. The middle compartment is used to show the details of the field, usually used to show the details of the fields of the class, and the bottom compartment is used to show the details of the methods of this particular class. You also know that every member of a class can have some kind of an access specifier. Access specifier actually tells you where and where this particular member of the class is accessible, whether it is accessible only within the class, whether you can access it outside the class as well, so on and so forth. So there are three different types of access types that can be applied to these members of the class. If you when these this access type has to be put right before the name of the member. So if you put a minus, it means that this member is private. If you put a hash, it means that the member is protected, and if you put a plus, it means that the member is public. So again, what exactly are we really defining here? These are just a set of conventions, okay? And as long as the people to whom you are going to send these class diagrams to, as long as they are aware of these conventions, you can simply draw the diagrams and send them over to them, and they can easily interpret it, right? This is the idea. So this is an example of how a class looks like in a class diagram. You put the name of the class on top, then this is how you put the details of a private field. This type here means that you are going to tell me the type of this field. By the way, it's not really as what can I say? So all these things, all these conventions, they are not really followed religiously all the time. Okay, you do get a lot of freedom in using these things in a class diagram, because please understand that these are not executable things. Okay, these are things which are being used to communicate information. So as long as the person on the other end is able to understand whatever you have written in this particular diagram, it is fine. You may not even follow all the UML conventions, but usually, this is what people do. They put the type of this field here. So it could be something like minus name colon string. So name is a field and its type is string, and because there is a minus here, it means that it is a private field. Similarly, a protected field is represented by putting a hash before its name. And a public field, for a public field, you can put a plus before the name. So this is how you represent fields. And for methods, you basically put this minus hash and plus, that is applicable to methods as well. And you put the name of the method, then you put the arguments. So arguments as in, again, here also you have a lot of freedom. You can either put the arguments similar to how you do that in a prototype. You can simply say this particular method takes two integers, int comma int. Or you can even write the name of these parameters, saying that the first integer is this, it means this. The second integer is this, it means this. And then you can also put a return type, that this method is going to return a type of this. So all this, there is a lot of flexibility. The amount of details that you would like to mention, it depends on you. It depends on your project, the people, the stakeholders, whomsoever who are going to read this diagram. So the amount of details that you would like to put, it's up to you. But this is the general format in which you create and represent a class in a class diagram. So one more thing, there are two more conventions that are often used. So let us say if you want to create a method, which if you want to to flag a method as an abstract method. So abstract methods are methods whose definitions are not provided in the same class, right? I mean, you provide the definition in some other class. So basically some derived class. So if you want to show a method as abstract, you make it italics. The style of that method could be made italics to show that it is abstract. And the same thing goes for the class name as well. So if you want to show that the class is abstract, you can make its name italics. So italics is used to convey the concept of being abstract. Um, the I, I I understand that the term abstract may not strike well with you, but that is the most standard term that people use. In the C++ realm, the term that is often used is virtual. Even though virtual and abstract are not exactly the same, but for our intents and purposes, I think you can consider this to be virtual as well. And the static members, let us say your class has some static members. For to represent static members, all you can do is simply underline them. So these are two more conventions that you might often see in a typical class diagram. Any questions here? Okay. So I told you that whenever you are going to represent something in the form of a diagram, basically a diagram is nothing more than boxes and lines, right? So classes are the boxes in this diagram, right? These are the entities in this diagram. And lines are the relationships. They tell you how one box relates to another box within the same diagram. So in a class diagram, there are different types of relationships that you can show between two or more classes. The most general, and by the way, there is in the I think it was lecture 2.2 or something like that. When I gave an introduction to object-oriented methodology, I I told that association is the general name of linkage between any two classes, and then generalization and aggregation are just forms of association. But when I checked up the text again, I realized that they don't treat generalization as a form of association. So there is a correction in one of the lectures from week 2. I have put the link, I have put the details in the homework, so you can go and check it out. Yeah, so basically, the most general type of relationship between any two classes that you usually show in a class diagram is an association. Association basically means that one of these classes is going to use the other class in some fashion. So usually it means that one or more objects of a particular type are contained in an object of the other type. So it's like saying that this particular class has a field whose type is of another class, right? So that is what is probably the most common example of association. If you want to show an association between two classes in a class diagram, all you need to do is simply draw a solid line between them, something like this. So here I'm trying to say that class A and class B has an association between themselves. So that example was a very simple, crude example, that there are two boxes in your class diagram, and you've connected them using a line, and this line means that there is an association. But usually it is too little. Okay, I mean, unless the model is absolutely obvious, this this relationship was too trivial. It doesn't really give too much of an information about what kind of association these two classes have with each other. So there are certain things that you can do with that line. Okay, you can add some decorations on that line. Okay, so first type of decoration that you can do is that you can add a text over or below this association line, but you write it towards the center of the line, not towards either ends. Okay, the if you write it towards the center of the line, either above or below, this actually represents the name of this relationship. So coming going back to that banking example, one way to look at it is something like this. A customer has one, zero or more accounts. Okay, zero or more. Why? Because sometimes a bank may have a customer who doesn't have an account with the bank. So it could be a person who has just taken a loan, or who just have a high has a credit card with the bank, but that person doesn't own an account or have an account in their bank. And it is also possible that there are certain customers who have more than one account in the bank as well. So basically the relationship between so one relationship between customer and account is that a customer can have zero or more accounts. Now, if you start seeing it from the perspective of accounts, you can say that a particular account could either be owned by one customer, if it's a single account, or it could be owned by two customers if it's a joint account. I'm not sure more than two people can have the same account or not, but yeah, up to two it is certainly possible. So with respect to an account, the relationship is there can be one or two customers associated with each account, right? So you can see that there are two classes, account and customer, and they have a relationship between them. Okay, so one way to say it is customer owns account, right? So the relationship name here is owns, right? So if you want to give some more details about this relationship, one way to do that is by writing the name of the relationship, and this is written towards the center of the line, either above or below that. Another type of information that people often provide is multiplicity. So I just gave you an example that when it comes to account and customer, the number of accounts associated with a customer could be 0, 1, 2, 3, or anything more than that, right? So the idea is it could be 0 or more. Similarly, the number of customers associated with a particular account could either be 1 or 2. So there are only two options, 1 or 2. So people often write these things on the line as well, the association line as well, that how many number of objects of one particular type can be involved in an association, minimum as well as maximum numbers. If you are also providing this information, this is known as multiplicity. And this is how you show these things when the association is by decorating the association line. You can put the name of the relationship. It should be in no towards the center of this line. Don't put it here or here, towards the center of the line. And towards the ends of the lines you can put multiplicities. Okay, this is talking about the number of instances of one class that are going to participate in the association. And multiplicity is provided in a fixed format. Okay, it looks something like this: the lower bound, then two dots, and then the upper bound. Okay, and there is a wildcard character asterisk that can replace these lower or upper bounds. Asterisk basically means many, it simply means many, or it can be interpreted as 0 or more. So in cases where you do not want to where you want to say that this number could be anything, asterisk is what you use. Okay, it could be anything. And if both this lower bound and upper bound are exactly the same, so if it's something like exactly n instances of a particular class are going to be involved in this association, so then you'll write n dot dot n. So instead of that, people also just write n, right? When both of these are same, you can just write n as well. Any questions still here? Okay. So this was the idea of association, that and as I said, usually associations mean that one class might have the instance of another class, right? The a type of another class as its member variable, right? But there is a specific name for this type of association, where one class is going to have another class as its part. Okay, by the way, the generic form of association, it is possible that both classes have instances of each other as their member variables. It is possible to do that. Okay, so that is a kind of association which is not an aggregation. Okay, but aggregation is a specific form of association where one class, let us say class A, is going to have an object of class B as its member. Okay, a member variable. So in such a case, what we really represent is the so-called part of relationship, that um, members of class X are a part of an object of class X is a part of an object of class Y. That is what we are trying to represent here. The part of relationship in the real world is also known as aggregation in UML. So an aggregation is shown by simply adding a diamond to the association line towards the containing class. So something like this. So let us say I have two classes. One is called container, the other one is, let us say, called part. So if I represent something like this in the class diagram, what it means is that an object of class container type will have objects. It could be one or more, by the way, of class part as its member variables. Is this part clear? Do you understand what is aggregation? In aggregation, I'm basically saying that there is one particular class. When you create an object of this class, objects of the other class are going to be created automatically, because they are a part of this overall object. So you understand this? Any queries on what is aggregation till here? I will give you an example. So assume that in the toy world that we have been seeing as an example for all this while, let us say you have a battery operated toy and a battery, right? So this battery, whenever you want to run this toy, you have to put the battery within the battery operated toy, and then these days you also, I think, have a screw, so you have to tighten the screw so that the battery doesn't come out. So then the battery really becomes a part of that toy, right? Once you put it in, it becomes a part of that toy. So there is a relationship, there is a part of relationship between the battery operated toy and the battery. Now, is this part clear? Is this example clear? Any questions on this? Okay, so then there is an even specific form of aggregation called as composition. Okay, so in case of composition, it is still a case of aggregation, so there is a part of relationship between two classes. But here what happens is, the part class, right, the objects of part class, they really do not have any significance without their container. Okay, so without their container, they are useless in some ways, right? So another way to look at it is, whenever you destroy the container, the parts are also destroyed. There is really no point in having them without the container, right? So if the relationship between the part and the container is so strong that the part is basically dependent for its existence on the container, we call it a specific case of aggregation called composition. So one example could be something like this. It's a very poor example, but I wanted to give you some example of composition as well. So one example could be, let us say you have a toy set, which is basically a battery operated remote controlled car, and then you also have that remote control. So now this remote is a part of the overall system. In order for the car to run, it needs to be tightly present, right? It needs to be within a few meters of the car. But if the car goes bad, right? I mean, if the system goes bad, then the remote really doesn't it has no significance. You can throw it away as well. So that is some kind of thing that I'm trying to tell you with composition, that in composition, the individual elements, they do not really make much sense independent of their container. So one example that I have seen on a tutorial, I have put the link of that tutorial later for additional reading as well, is that they say that our human body is built up of different organs, right? Liver, stomach, heart, all these things, and they are independent, right? I mean, they are independent organs altogether, but they do not make any sense if they are outside the body, right? I mean, they have to function as a part of the body. If they are not a part of the body, if the body dies, they die with it as well. So that is some kind of a loose feeling, that this is what is composition. I understand that it might be slightly confusing. So the way to look at it is something like this. If you are not able to differentiate between composition and aggregation, be safe and always assume it's aggregation. Okay. You can always upgrade this relationship to be a composition later, if you realize it is really composition. But in the beginning, you might not even think about composition. Just try to think whether it is aggregation or not, right? But I just told you that there's another specific form of aggregation called composition. Any questions still here? And this is how you show composition. You basically make this diamond solid. If this is solid, it means composition. If it is hollow, it means simple aggregation. Any questions still here? Okay. So there's one more type of relationship that you would probably be required to show in a typical class diagram, and that relationship is basically the core relationship that we've been studying all this while in object oriented methodologies, right? That is inheritance, really. In fact, uh, one of the major highlights of object orientedness is inheritance, that you create one class and then you define subtypes of this class. By the way, I did send an email yesterday, please read it. I sent it to the whole batch because I'm seeing so many students making this mistake, that they really do not understand what is inheritance. They feel that you create class X, and then you create another class Y, and you inherit Y from X, and then this is inheritance. No, this is not inheritance. There has to be a logical explanation for saying that Y is inheriting from X. Okay, and for that I said that you should be able to say Y is a type of X. Okay, and if that makes sense, only then is it inheritance. Otherwise, it is just a misuse of the language features which lets you share code between two classes. So please keep this in mind, that if you're talking about inheritance, you have to be absolutely sure that class X and class Y have that relationship in the real world. Okay. Anyhow, coming back. When you're creating your class diagrams, one of the most common relationships that you'll be displaying will be the relationship of super class and derived class, parent as well as child. So to show that, there is a connector, the generalization specialization connector in UML that you can use. It looks similar to an aggregation, but instead of a diamond, you simply put a hollow triangle towards the parent side. And this is the example. This is a parent class, this is a child class. This is basically child is inheriting from parent. So if you want to show it in UML, you draw a line and then you add a hollow triangle towards the parent. That you have to keep in mind. And by the way, these decorations that I talked about with associations, the issue is that when you start working with any UML designing tools, I use an online tool called Draw.io to design my diagrams. It also has UML support, but the problem with Draw.io is that it actually doesn't stop you from adding decorations to, let us say, generalization as well. Okay, so it is because of this you might sometimes see diagrams where there are decorations and multiplicities being shown in generalizations as well, but it is not required. You have to understand that generalization in itself is a complete relationship. You understand that X derives from Y. So Y is the superclass of X. You really don't need to decorate this connector, this line. But in UML designing tools, you might be given this option. It is not recommended that you do so, but of course, because uh, many people do not follow UML religiously, you can certainly try to add decorations as well. The same thing is true with multiplicities, both relationship name as well as multiplicities. One last thing to add is that whenever you are going to create an association between two classes, I gave you the example of account and customer. It is a good idea that if you are adding the relationship name, you should also add an arrow to either of the two ends of the association, so that the user can easily understand what you really mean, right? What is the direction of the relationship that you're talking about. So when I say the name of the relationship is owns, okay, so and what I really want is is that the user reads it like customer owns accounts. So I should put an arrow which goes from customer to account, okay, towards the account side. So normally you will see arrows being added to associations, so that you can easily interpret the relationship name. So that is it. Please check out the homework. The homework is that you have to design class diagrams for your projects. Okay, and this will be a part of the deliverables, whatever deliverables I'm going to ask you for the project. The class diagrams are supposed to be one of them. So it's very important that you draw class diagrams now for your projects. Okay, there are some other things. And by the way, this is the lecture 2.1. There is a correction in one of the slides. So if you have already downloaded the PDF, please re-download it, the updated version. There was one mistake. And there is a YouTube tutorial also. Please, if you have time, it's only 8 minutes in length, and it covers class diagrams pretty well. So please go and have a look at it. uh, okay, that's it. Any questions now? No questions. Okay, so if there are no questions, just to give you the reminder, we will have an extra class over the weekend because I lost a class due to COVID vaccination. I think Shore from the other batch is going to float a form to you guys. So please fill in your preferences for either a Friday evening slot or a Saturday evening slot, and we'll have an extra class on that day. So that will be a common extra class for both sections, and we will discuss some code related to multi-threading. We'll discuss what multi-threading is tomorrow. But yeah, so there are actually some tools. You can simply type UML tools. There are so many available. The one I use is this. Let me just. I think I have shown this to you guys already. But let me just show it to you again. So can you see the URL on in this tab? I don't know what does it share when I share a
No, sir.
tab. Yeah, you
No,
can see. You can.
no,
Okay.
sir. We cannot see the URL.
Oh, you cannot. Okay, so basically the URL, I'm just typing it in the chat. Just a minute. Mm, you can open this. Okay. So it used to be called draw.io. I'm not sure. I think they have changed their name. I'm a very old user of this site. So they have these diagrams here. There is a UML section altogether, but it's a bit too complicated actually. I mean, so for example, you can directly create a class like this uh, here. You can create a class like this. Okay, so you can see this is class name. This is field type. There are many issues with it. So some class, if you want to add a new field, the problem is you simply have to do Control C and Control V. Sorry, how would it do that? Duplicate. So if you duplicate it, it goes towards the bottom. So there are a lot of bugs here. You can pull it up like this. Okay. So this is a way to add a field, and to add a method, you do it like this: duplicate. Okay. So this is one way to create a class, and then there are these connectors out here. And by the way, you'll see all these in other types of of UML diagrams. But there are all these connectors out here that you can use. Um, where is it? There will be mm, association, generalization, dependency. So we have not discussed dependency actually. Aggregation. So let me show you aggregation. So this is aggregation, by the way, the aggregation connector. Okay. and what is it, message, aggregation 1, aggregation, association, relation. So I don't use it directly. Basically, I don't. Yeah, this is aggregation without multiplicity, and this is aggregation with multiplicity. So I don't use it as such because it's not too flexible. So what I generally do is I draw it from the generic drawing tools that they have here in the general section. They have rectangles, lines, everything. So because I do not like their and I showed you, right, I mean, in order to create a new field I have to make it duplicate. So I do not use theirs. I simply draw these boxes on my own. It's much easier for me, but it's up to you. You can use their UML suite as well. But and then you can type on internet UML designers. There are many UML designers out there. Some are free, some are paid. So but you understand that you don't really need a UML designer. I simply use the simple boxes and lines in on these drawing tools. You can draw it in PowerPoint actually, if you want to. Yeah, all you need are boxes and lines and triangles and diamonds. So uh, you don't really need a different tool for it. But if you want, you can use this. Any other questions? Okay. So yeah, so we'll have an extra class on Friday. I think Shore will send you guys a form to fill up, and yeah, the exams, the lab exams are on 3rd and 10th July. Okay, any other queries? All right. Any
So
queries
about the deadline of the
Mhm.
mini project,
about the deadline of the?
mini projects.
Yeah, so project you'll have to submit your reports by, I think I checked the dates yesterday. Basically by Sunday, right before the, I think if the exam starts on Monday, you have to submit the reports by Sunday. That's it. I do not want you guys to take the reports job with you during the end sem. Okay, during the end sem, you should, by before the end sem your reports should be ready. Okay, the viva that I'll take.
Sunday, you mean coming Sunday?
No, 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 no. The your project reports are due 1 day before your end sem starts.
Okay, okay, sir.
Okay, so right before your end sem. If I'm not wrong, your end sems are starting from 12th or 13th of July, something like this. It's a Monday. So I think it's 12th. So the project reports deadline is July 11th. If Monday is July 12th, then it is July 11th. Okay, July 11, 11:59 p.m. IST. So that is your deadline for project reports. And there will be a project Viva, so that I will hold after your end sem exams. So, but you must prepare the reports by your by before you go into the end sem exams. Any other questions? Okay, guys. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.